Hello and welcome to the Permaculture Herbalism segment of the Elder Tree podcast. I am your host, Tennille Christensen from Earth Mama, where I teach people how to thrive and get skilled for sustainability. As an educator, kitchen witch, and plant lover, I welcome you to tune in as I interview permaculturalists from around the world. We will learn holistic ways of integrating plants into our homes, gardens, and communities for healing. Together, we will explore the art and science of this regenerative design system and harvest the collective wisdom. Permaculture offers a pathway to empower people to develop their lifestyles and landscapes. So let's discover how to grow and know plants with a purpose.
We say in the Eco Village movement, anybody can build anything. You can get a builder to build a village. You know, a few cabins here do this and that. But it's the social infrastructure that's really difficult to build, and that's the thing that we need. Our superpower is that we work together.
That was Andrew McLe from Eco Villages Australia and co-founder and resident of the Maleny Eco Village. If you haven't yet heard of the term 8 forms of wealth or 8 forms of capital, or of sacred economics or the gift economy, then this episode is a real treat. If you're interested in eco-village design and the true essence of people care and social permaculture, then tune in for this episode as we explore these and many other topics. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining me today. We recently met at the Elder Tree fundraiser. It was a beautiful gathering, and we were exploring the GEN network, that is the Global Eco Village Network design cards as pathways to regenerate community living. So thanks for supporting us at the event and for doing this interview and sharing your wisdom today.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Then I came along to Eco Village Forum, which I found particularly interesting, answered a lot of questions for me. I really loved the model and a lot of the solutions, I guess, that I have considered as concerns in terms of going into eco villages. And it sounds like you've really done, a well thought out and embodied experience of starting an eco village. So I'd love to explore this conversation with you in this interview, because I think you have such valuable information to share with a lot of our listeners. But do you mind first if we delve into your world of permaculture and plants? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So why is permaculture an important aspect of your life?
Yeah, I'm a late comer to permaculture, really, but I was talking to David Holmgren, the co-originator of permaculture some time ago, a couple of years ago, and he sort of actually sort of said we've actually deceived people with permaculture. It's just tribal knowledge, First Nations knowledge with a fancy name, with a fancy sort of Western package, and I guess that's what I love about it. It goes back to our roots, about what's important. I love that it does not just talk about gardening, and it is about building design and even, I guess, your own internal health and all this sort of stuff. It's all encompassing. It's a way of life, not prescriptive, but it's descriptive. It describes a life that is kinder on ourselves and kinder on the planet. So yeah, it's pretty. I really love it, and David Holmgren's book, Retro Suburbia, is excellent. It's like his whole life sort of learnings in one book. If you want to go and learn how to build a cool room, cold storage, without electricity, and in the apocalypse, then you go for it. Yeah, it's a good book for that.
For sure. The most innovative design all pulled together in one book. And yeah, I love what you just shared with the First Nations conversation there. It's I had a speaking with the first, a beautiful Indigenous sister, and we were talking about permaculture, and I'm like, it's just packaged for us, because we've come from, we've been programmed a different way, and so it's a way, it's been programmed in a way that is just the way First Nations people actually lived. And it, from an anthropological aspect, those, David and Bill did a lot of travel, especially Bill, and
Mm.
a lot of that wisdom. It's universal. It's something that is, um, you know, permaculture was practiced by everybody, by all First Nations people, because they produce
Absolutely.
no waste. Like our Western mindset of, or the colonizers that came to Australia and then looked at the land and decided that these people were savages and they were hunter and gatherers because they didn't have fields of agriculture. Yet they did, but it was
Well,
so.
Dark Emu is a really brilliant book about that. It
Mm,
just shows that actually they were agriculturalists and absolutely
mm,
permaculturalists. Absolutely. I think permaculture is actually Australia's greatest export.
yes.
Maybe with the exception of INXS and ACDC, but and a lot of people still don't know about it. A friend of mine actually, when I was in the early '90s, like exposed me to it, and I'm glad I at least heard about it. Didn't explore too much until later, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the mainstream really still don't know about it, which is, I guess it's our job, isn't it, to get it out there further.
Yeah, yeah. But I am constantly surprised at, the when we run workshops and courses, at the people who are showing up to learn. And, we've got architects coming, we've got nurses, we have police officers, we have people in the army, teachers. Like, it's so broad. And, they are actually hearing about it on Gardening Australia, or, there are some really incredible films that have come out that really highlight regenerative permaculture or regenerative agriculture, and how that, regenerative agriculture practices are just one technique within the land and nature steward pedal of the whole permaculture framework. But
Yeah, absolutely.
it's the way people want to eat, and they want organic food that's affordable, and they're concerned about food security. So that's sort of the entry point where people are looking at what can I do? Can I grow food in my own garden in an urban environment? And I do feel like it's come a long way, because when I did my PDC and then started my business, my first business, which was homegrown edible gardens back in
Mm,
Townsville, I spent so much time just explaining to people what permaculture was before I could even get to, just educating them about what it was and why it was needed. And now people call us, like, we actually changed our business name to Edible Landscapes and Design instead of
hmm
permaculture. And people would then, it flipped. People were like, oh, so you do permaculture? It's like, okay, there has been a shift and people are looking for it. But it is, yeah, enough about me. Did you end up
Yeah, no,
studying?
it's great.
Did you
What was that,
study, or
sorry?
did you study a PDC, or have you been like self-taught, reading a lot of books and things like that?
Yeah, I pretty much self-taught. When we started the Eco Village in Maleny, really just gathering a group of people, including some big names in the permaculture scene, like Robin Clayfield and so forth. So, getting them on site and talking and yeah, I think that was a real key that we didn't expect, actually, that in fact these sort of alternate projects are really best done in a strong alternate sort of space, in location wise. So we've got lots of alternate builders, lots of permaculturalists around, and that made a big difference. So yeah, I haven't actually done a PDC, which I probably should, one day. But it's sort of, I have read a lot about it and live it, I suppose. It was really interesting when we were rebuilding our little building, and we wanted big glass windows to the east and to the north, and we put them in, and you realise that almost every single house in the whole town is not built for the sun,
Yep.
not built in orientation for sun. Not gardens, buildings, everything, roadways. I just imagine if town planners and so forth actually were able to do that a bit better. I mean, it's just. And people who rent are in even worse position, because these houses are cold and hot and take so much energy to heat and cool, and a lot of their incomes burn up in this, in heating and cooling their houses and this sort of thing. It's a bit insane.
It is totally insane. And once you actually have your perma goggles on and you see how simple it is to read a landscape, look at the sectors, understand the energies, and then design for it, you actually see how the rest of society is so poorly designed. It's like,
Did you say perma goggles?
yes, perma
I,
goggles.
I love it. I
Well,
haven't
that's
heard that one. That's
Well,
great.
I think that's what happens after a 10 to 14 day intensive permaculture design course is that you then have permagoggles. And you said you haven't formally studied, but people who come along and learn, they're just, and I was that person too. It's like, this just makes so much sense.
Yeah,
I just feel like I'm remembering. And so I think it's in our cells. And I think a lot of us walk around confused going, why is the world the way it is? Why is this not making sense? And we're turning up to workplaces or living in homes that are just not harmonious with the environment or with, the natural energies. And it's messing with us.
absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, not just our back pockets, but just our very soul, like we live in these soulless places that just have no sense. They make no sense except for the motor car. They make sense for the motor car, and that's
Mm,
it.
yeah. The shortest possible route and the most cost
Mm,
effective that provides the
yes,
highest profit.
yes. We have a.
Yes.
Have you heard of um, a timeless way of building or a pattern language? Have you heard of those books?
Definitely pattern language, not the
Yeah, the
time.
same
Yeah.
same same book, same guy. That's it's
Okay.
a trilogy actually, and yeah, we sort of came up with this pattern language in our eco village that we have a meandering path. So anytime we put a pathway in, it needs to be meandering. It
Yeah.
can't be the most direct and efficient way to get to point A, point B. And it's really good. It's really cool how it slows people down. It's prettier.
Yeah.
And when you do see a straight path, you go, oh, that doesn't look right. It's too efficient or something.
Yeah, it gives you time to notice the plants and the animals
Mm.
and give you an opportunity to take a few deeper breaths before you get to the next spot, onto the next activity.
Even activists and so forth say, like we need more money, we need more energy, and I think it's energy and money that's actually put us in this problem, and we know that the things that got us into the problem are probably not going to be the things that get us out. So so maybe money and activity isn't the thing that we need. Maybe more rest, maybe more mindfulness and all that sort of thing is actually what we need as a society to move forward.
Yeah, and I loved like the eight forms of capital or the eight forms of wealth is something that I've learnt in the permaculture world, and it's something that is a lesson that I teach in my online course because I just think it's so valuable and it's such a great way to see the bigger picture and the holistic aspects of all of our lives and what wealth and capital actually means. And you mentioned this in the
Yes.
forum the other day. So, are you happy to share on that? And because you termed the word permaculture economics.
Economic permaculture. Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah. We love the eight forms of capital, and I can only ever remember seven when I haven't got it written in front of me. But,
I've
but
got them. It's social, material, living, experiential, cultural, intellectual, spiritual, and financial.
and it's so brilliant because like I sort of said, like when you grow up and leave school and start go to uni or go to TAFE or whatever and get a job, and we get a good job, we nail the financial, we try to, and we we buy lots of rubbish with it, and mum and dad are really proud of us because we've made it, we're successful in our world, and there's a really impoverished view of the world. Like the tree that I'm seeing right now, it's worth more in those through those goggles as six park benches. So why wouldn't we cut the tree down, make six park benches up, and then actually sell it because it's got financial and material capital? But when all you got to do is put one level of capital, another layer of capital in there, natural capital. Well, okay, hang on, maybe it is worth more as a tree than as six car park benches, and it sort of makes sense. But in our world, cut the thing down. It's crazy. It really is crazy. So
Mm.
we've made in our community we have those 8 forms of capital in our mind when we make decisions. Do we paint the house? That's going to rob us of experiential capital. It's going to cost us some financial capital and this sort of thing. And how and it just helps us make those decisions. It gives us a framework to make those decisions, and it's probably a good thing, I think, to have those 8 forms of capital on our wall at all times, just to sort of keep referring back to and say what are we here for? What does cultural capital look like? What does beauty look like? What does like a meandering path is not efficient, but it's beautiful. So why not increase our cultural capital? All this sort of stuff. I think it's really, really brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it really surprised. I mean, it surprises me, but it's also I've been in the place of ignorance as well. But when I discovered ecosystem services and I teach that to people and seeing the aha and the oh, why didn't I learn this at school kind of thing? I
Mm,
was there. This is why I'm so passionate about teaching and about exploring more permaculture because a tree and ecosystem services it's like okay, well, it could be a park bench. Do we need more? And
yeah,
if we need a park bench, then okay, well, if we're growing this on our site, it's probably the most sustainable way to make one. But let's look at the bees, the birds, that the habitat that it provides, the
yeah,
carbon that it sequestrates, the water table that it draws up through its roots, the shade that it provides us, the leaves that it gives us for mulch, the microorganisms that are in, under, and surrounding it, the oxygen that it provides to us, the erosion that it prevents. Like you can just, all of the cultural, and there's just so much more depth to just the tree and the cost of sales for park benches.
absolutely. In our community, we talk a lot about um, capacity. Like some people have a capacity of a red cedar, a financial capacity of a red cedar, an emotional capacity of a blade of grass, and some people have um, you know a emotional capacity of a red cedar and a financial capacity of a blade of grass, and it's not the red cedar never looks down at the blade of grass and says, look, you guys are doing nothing. Like it's all up to me. I'm the heavy lifter here. And in our world, we do that. We get this sort of strong messages from our culture that if you're not making big dollars and stuff, you're actually useless. And like when First Nations people created a beautiful society that had everybody had a job, everybody had something to do, everybody had worth, everybody had meaning, everybody had a house, everybody had a like this. We've created this society of severe mismanagement. I think obviously ecological mismanagement and social mismanagement. I mean, we say in the Eco Village movement, anybody can build anything. You can get a builder to build a village. A few cabins here, do this and that, but it's the social infrastructure that's really difficult to build, and that's the thing that we need. If we don't get the social stuff right, and this is a bit of a saying that we have at the Eco Village as well, that if we don't get the social stuff right, we humans might not last the next couple of 100 years. Our superpower is that we work together. I mean, if we accept the out of Africa type thing that the humanity came out, or Homo sapiens came out of Africa, then our prey and our food was bigger than, stronger than us. And this was our superpower, to work together so that we can do incredible things. And I think capitalism is really an affront for that. Where suddenly, because if I get the job, you don't. And it's in the competition and so forth, and that's really, and I love the whole thing about the fungi world and mycelium and stuff, that we're realizing that in fact it's not like capitalism. The forest isn't like capitalism, that we're the strongest ones win. It's actually we're working together, that through the mycelium networks and the mycorrhizal networks, that trees can actually get the message for one, that this other tree needs more phosphorus, and actually pass phosphorus through the roots and the mycorrhizal system. And this is insane. This is incredible. We live in exciting times because I think we're starting to break down our ways that we've seen things in the last few 100 years, particularly economically. You know,
Yeah.
we only had the first billionaire 120 years ago. You know, we've sort of we believe it's a faith statement or faith belief that we need billionaires in the system for our system to work. It's not true. For thousands of years, for millennia, we've not had billionaires in the system, and it worked fine. Thank you very much. You know.
Maybe they were the kings and queens of the monarchies and the
And that's
pharaohs or
only
something.
yeah, and that's true. But I mean, they again, if even that
Mass
system, there was only
control.
the that was one that was control, yes, and that was only one sort of person. Whereas now we got, you know, like the Australia Institute says, you know, billionaires in a system is a sign that the system's not doing well. We think it's a good thing, but you know, billionaires getting created every day or something now. I think I can't remember the exact stats, but you know, it's becoming, you know, and these billionaires they far too much power. Like they can do what what they do with their money really has big ramifications for where humanity is going, and we've got to stop and think about that. And I think we need to, you know, it'd be better to have a conversation with all of us to say where do we want that money to go, you know, but we can't have any control because they're billionaires. Anyway, I can talk a bit about economic permaculture as well, if you're interested. Like you did bring it up before. So, you
Yep.
know, when we started our project, we most eco villages start very firmly in two sectors. We want to do social regeneration. We want to get to know people. We want to live with them, and we also want to do, you know, ecological regeneration. So we want to restore the ecology around us, and that's the, you know, some only do one of them, some forget the others, but most eco villages and eco communities start that with those two in mind. But we realised very quickly that without thinking about the economic sphere as well, the economic regeneration, then there was a big hole in the project, you know. So as you said, you know, in permaculture, there's no waste. There's circular systems, and that's what we do. You know, we have this circular economic system. So we loan our money. People who can loan their money to the eco village, and then that money then is paid back. As people rent, and we all rent whether we've loaned money or not, and we sort of pay back ourselves in this sort of circular economy. And you know, I was a householder in Brisbane. I sold my house. That I'd paid it off only just, and the person that bought it is now that has got that piece of land under mortgage. It was free. This land was free for an instant, and now it's not again. You know, and this is we love these. You know, like one of the things I love about permaculture, I think we think in terms of maturity. Not I haven't heard too many permaculture teachers teach this, but I like this idea that, you know, that permaculture is about maturity. So, you know, we are completely in love with the immature. I'm quite convinced of this. Immature ecological systems. You know, there's no more immature ecological system than a front yard, a front lawn. You know, it's trying to get to forest, but we keep cutting it down, and it doesn't get there. We continue, you know, we're in a state of immaturity. And Bill Mollison says, you know, if you've got a detached house with a front lawn, you know, and two cars, you're using more energy than an African village of 2,000 people. You know, this is something we really have to come to grips with. Another person in the eco village movement said, you know, it turns out, he did this big study, and it says it turns out if you're an ecological slob, so you don't care about the ecology, and you live in a apartment block in America. This is in the cold weather, cold parts of America. Turns out you're doing better than an environmental champion living in a detached house. A detached house is just like one house on one block, because, you know, when you're in the snow, the best place to live is if someone else on the other side of the wall is heating it because they're living there. You know, these sort of apartment units. So you know, the way how we've set up our structures in Australia, we love our quarter-acre block and my big house on it now. It's really, really damaging to our ecology. So yeah, we have these, yeah. And we're in love with these immature ecological systems. We're in love with these immature banking systems, like I mentioned. We're in love with our immature social systems as well. We'd rather ring up council and say, hey, you know, the next door neighbour's starting his mower at 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and, you know, rather than actually just going up and talking to them, you know, and we've lost that art too. So this is like looking at the lens, our what was it, permagoggles through maturity. I think it's a really interesting thing, because we've got man children, all over the place. We love immaturity. We're obsessed with it, and all our media seems to, and culture seems to want to, to keep that going, and there's something really impoverished about that.
It all comes down to relationships, I feel. It's like we don't have relationships in our financial transactions so much anymore. We don't have the relationships in our living spaces. It's just like, as you said,
Absolutely.
a big house with minimal people in it, on a large block, or, tiny blocks these days, cramming it all in. Or relationships with our ecology around us, and just having monocultures of grass, or purchasing and eating monoculture badly grown food, or putting in ornamental plants that actually have a
Yes.
very minimal function to
Yes.
support our needs. And yeah.
Yeah, like every part of the house that we built, and rebuilt in the eco village, is has a story to it. We remember the people that helped us do that. Whether it was Ellie from Canada, I was going to say, from Canada, and it all these stories. Tammy put this in, and like it's really rich. We could have paid someone, $200,000, $300,000, whatever, to pay to build this, but again, this sort of like the 8 forms of capital. We've missed that experiential capital, and that experiential capital is alive for the total time that the building stands. And people are there. We remember who's done that. I love what you said about relationship. Like Charles Eisenstein in his book, Sacred Economics, says that banking used to be a beautiful thing. If someone had spare money, they would put it into a bank and get it looked after. And then someone would come and say, look, some young person would come and say, look, there's no bakery in this town, and I'm really passionate about baking. I'd love to do this. And do you think you can do that, son? Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, here's $100,000 and try. It was a beautiful thing. Like people that haven't got, that didn't need money, and someone who does money, and it's a bit of an exchange. But shareholders really just destroyed that. Like now the banks are completely there just to for the shareholders' benefit, just to return profit. Yeah. Insurance, the same way. Like it was a really lovely socialistic thing. Like if we all put money in, one house burns down, the money goes to that person. Like it's really quite a socialist sort of proposition. And again, but when as soon as you add shareholders into that sort of mix, then you really get a perversion of that system.
Yeah, and you mentioned how with the seeding, or the financial seeding for your eco village, you did it with, permaculture economics, I suppose. You did it with zero interest. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I'm a business person, and lending my money at 0% interest is just an insane sort of thing. But when you look at the 8 forms of capital, and all I'm doing, and it's not hard baked into our model. If somebody wants to build a village and charge interest for that, then that they can. We're trying to show people that when you actually, and this is again a Charles Eisenstein sacred economics thing, if as soon as you introduce the interest into a system, you actually introduce the need for growth, and that's what's messing with our planet right now. Like we've got this economic model that relies on infinite growth, and it's a finite planet. I mean, another author I really love, Douglas Rushkoff, and he says he was at a AGM of one of the big soft drink companies, and I'd imagine it was either Coke or Pepsi, and the CEO got everybody to chant 5.3, 5.3, 5. Because this was their growth target they needed to make, or that they think they needed to make this next year. And it was like, he goes, you're the biggest company in the world doing so much harm to the environment. More, Coke has more plastic bottles than any other company in the world going into the ocean and this sort of thing, and you still need to grow. I mean, what is our system on about? I mean, we just don't have this in nature. Like you said, the big tree doesn't say to the little grass, grow, 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 become like me. Without that piece of grass and his mates and her mates, we get erosion, and the tree actually could fall down. Like every part of the ecosystem is really important. And so we do need to see humanity in a different way, that we all got different capacities. People with children have less capacity to do outside work, because they're doing a really, really important job. I mean, the most important job, because the people that we grow are the people who are going to look after the land afterwards. It's critical that our children are balanced and fortunately this has been after 2 world wars, we've had 2 generations of men generally really damaged, and we are learning, we are relearning how to be humans again, and it's taking a long time, but we have got there are the shining lights around us. Yeah.
And yet war still continues over resource grab. I just had this visual of, you're talking about Coca-Cola and this like epic big organization, and it's like when you look at a forest, there's not one big tree that's soaking up all the resources and then providing, dropping all this product of leaf or oxygen. There's so many trees and there's so many different layers all supporting. It's comes back to that relationship and symbiotic. And if there's a need and a demand and we're providing services and products, it makes sense that there would be that, instead of having this, again, monocultural, this one big, strong, resource heavy thing, if it's spread out amongst many, there's enough.
I mean, even the Coca-Cola tree, it wouldn't drop leaves. It wouldn't, nourish. It would just be taking everything for itself and not giving. And this does not happen that doesn't happen in nature. I mean, a big fig tree, we've got an enormous fig tree. We call it home tree if you've seen Avatar. And it just gives so much. It nourishes itself and so many birds and so many little plants, and it's beautiful to watch. It's beautiful to sit under. And this is the Coca-Cola tree doesn't exist because in nature it only exists. Like many people know that corporations have been given the power of a human, and a human that only exists to make money is a really impoverished human. And I've been there, I must say, as well. Sometimes in my life it feels like that's been me, but you can't, it's not sustainable it's not a good human. It's not, there's so much more to being a human than that. And so we can't really give our corporations the status of a human, because they're certainly not. They're extractive, and even First Nations, they always talk about reciprocation, reciprocal. They're very, much more. Relationships are always reciprocal. I suppose that's a good word to throw in there when we're talking relationships.
It's embedded in culture. Yeah, reciprocal. Yeah, wow, so many interesting things just there. We were in question 1. So that's how permaculture's influenced your life. All right. Well, let's explore that topic more. But firstly, you've built ecological capital, or you've stewarded and caretake this special place of Maleny Eco Village. So how do you integrate plants and specifically from this herbalism perspective into either your home, your garden, or your community?
We're wild gardeners, and I must even say that we're probably gardening isn't our big strong point. Actually, we've had gardeners and so forth there, and it's been really interesting to see the difference in the gardening styles. And even what I like about retro suburbia is Holmgren is really happy to see the different types of gardening, whether you're wild gardening or more sort of more ordered, that sort of thing. But of course we got the stock standard permaculture hot hits like comfrey and pigeon peas and bananas and this sort of stuff. But I guess in some ways, I'd like to take a step back from that question in some ways and look at a more fundamental question. Like this land was colonized by Europeans, and I think much of the problem is that we have brought our European taste buds with us, and therefore we're actually asking our land to supply foods that it doesn't simply want to give. It can't give, because we're not Europe. Our soil is really poor there. It compacts so easily. Like, we know, like most people know that the cows and so forth have damaged our soils. Really, we got ancient but very, very poor soils, and and kangaroos and native animals just simply don't destroy the soil like imported stuff does. So, in thinking about plans, well, we surely natives have got to be one of the top of the list. Things that were here that that we have like there's been pictures and so forth of the plants that and Aboriginals ground seed to make flour, but their plants had, and I don't even know what they are. Sorry, I'm not there with that. But it's they're 6 foot deep roots, and the plants that we do for wheat and so forth have really shallow roots, and they don't hold the soil together and this sort of thing. So, we've really, what we try to do is grow food that the land wants to give us. Brassicas like cauliflower and broccoli are really hard to grow there, and you can by putting a lot of inputs in. But again, that's not really permaculture. Looking at minimizing our inputs, our human inputs. So pawpaw grows really well for us. That just springs up, but it doesn't ripen up in down in Maleny. So the winter's too cold. So we eat a lot of green pawpaw. I mean, it's really good for your gut, really good for your gut health. We don't. Most people think, pawpaw salad, green pawpaw salad. We don't. We've never done that. We don't do salad much in that sort of form. But in stews and like potatoes, in stir fries, that sort of thing. It's great. We use. And avocados grow like weeds there. Macadamia nuts we scavenge from friends. We harvest trees in public spaces and this sort of stuff. Eat lots of chocos. Like I told my mum we have a choco and we eat those things. She goes, "Why would you do that?" Like that's dunny fruit. So they used to call it back in the, like you'd have choco vine around the outdoor dunny. But we eat that exactly like we do the pawpaws. Like potatoes. And what we discovered is also you can eat them raw, like have them like a dip. We make some hummus, or even pigeon pea hummus is great, and then eat them raw with it. They're better than a celery stick, because celery for me is like water and string. I mean, why would you eat that? but it's actually really nice. Like having the chocos is really lovely. So yeah, we have bunya trees there in Maleny. Like every 2 years, we absolutely feast on bunyas. 9% protein, 2% fat. They're just a superfood, and they just fall from the sky. And I've made some corn chowder and bunya gnocchi, and we just eat a bunya mash. We eat a lot. These sort of things. What does the land want to give us? I think it's a really important, because I guess sometimes we ask the question, what do we want to grow? It's very, very us centric. And that's our culture, very, very individualistic. I mean, one thing I love about First Nations culture as well, Aboriginal culture, if I say my right leg is sore, that you would understand that, but if I turn 90 degrees and say my right leg is sore, it doesn't change. I'm the center of the universe. Whereas in Aboriginal culture, I'm not sure if it's ubiquitous or not, or all over the place or not, but certainly some mob used to say, or they would say, my north leg is sore. And then they turn and they'd say, my west leg is sore, and it's the same leg, because they are not the center of the universe. They are in relationship with the land. And from you imagine how that changes your perspective as a child growing up. Instead of saying my right leg is sore, they understand the landscape and where they sit in that landscape so much better than us.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question for me, I would rather ask, what is good for the land, what is good for, then what do we want out of it? It's, and I'm obviously not saying that we don't play any, we plant anything but natives or anything, but it is a good question to ask. Okay, what does grow well here? What is native to here? And can we eat that? Like we've eaten Madeira vine, and patches of Madeira vine is a really, really bad weed. It just takes over a monoculture. Again, permaculture principle: no monoculture. I've definitely got a different relationship with weeds now.
Yep.
We eat weeds, we let weeds grow for pioneer plants and this sort of thing. But the ones that I do want to give a hard time is the ones that threaten monocultures. I think any monoculture, whether it's ecological or social, is a bad thing. Diversity is always a good thing. So we've eaten whole patches of Madeira vine out. Like it's like a spinach. It's like a little sort of fleshy sort of thing, and it's really, really bad for rainforest. But like if you have it for lunch for a couple of times, for a couple of months, you've eaten it out, you've done it, and
Amazing.
what a way to kill, what a way to get rid of weeds, and eating the
Well,
mushrooms that grow up there and everything like that. This is what does the land want to give, and it's so easy to see because it wants to grow. Even what do they call them? Farmers' friends, the cobbler's pegs. They were
cobbler's
a very
pegs.
important plant for Aboriginal people. We get really annoyed because they cling onto ourselves and that sort of thing, but they are a sign of health and vitality in that area. And we've got a big blue billy goat weed, which is actually you can drink it as a tea or you can just rub it on your skin, and it's actually anti-tick sort of thing. So like how can we use these things that we normally call weeds?
Mm.
And I know next to nothing. Like there's the First Nations people around, and there's other people that and people that listening to this podcast will be able to say much more in this sort of regard. But yeah, and that's great. It's an exciting field.
It is, and something I would, yeah, the opportunity to learn about Australian medicine and
Mm,
plants is, like we learn, I feel like there's more books, there's more trainings, there's more ways to learn about, um, you know, the Amazon, the Amazonian plants than there is
yeah.
here, and maybe that's just my ignorance that I do have books, but I would love the opportunity for more relationship with going out on country. Even
Mm,
I'm not a First Nations person, but I feel like I relate in many ways. And you can go on a trip to Brazil or Peru or South America, and there's probably multiple ones happening right now, and go over there and learn from corianders about their plants. But I think Stephanie Hazel just did a beautiful podcast, and the most recent one with Sky on animism and ayahuasca. And it's culturally, I think Westerners are seeking more connection with the plant world and spiritual connection to our environment, but we don't really have a cultural pathway to get there. And people are traveling all the way over there, but for them it's in context of their local and their bioregion. So how do we do that here? I know Sam Marsh is doing some edible weed walks up in the tablelands, and the elder tree certainly is about putting medicine in the hands of people. But we still, like, it's
mm.
like we have so much to learn from First Nations people here.
Absolutely. The way they use it for washing and soap,
Soap
and the
nuts or
salt
the
bush and all sorts of stuff. It's just all the medicine trees, and I guess in our arrogance, we came to this land and we did not give a crap. We just took our knowledge and thought that was superior. And what a height of arrogance. Like these people have been living here for thousands and thousands of years, and didn't really ask
they
what's
never
good around them.
ceded sovereignty. It was
Exactly.
just
Exactly.
taken. Yeah,
Exactly.
and it really,
Yeah.
like when I think of, Europe and all of the big castles and, how ancient the architecture is over there, it's temperate climates, and, they had these big, how, they built big structures then, but Australian Indigenous First Nations people lived so in harmony with the land here that
Mm.
they haven't left big monolithic kind of because we because Uluru exists. Like
Yeah.
nature already has these
Yeah.
really incredible sacred sites, and
Yes.
and I just, yeah, I find it interesting because it's like when you say we came here, it's like our ancestors did, because you and I here and now,
Mm.
we
Mm.
didn't come here and do that, but there's that acknowledgement that our ancestors did come here for whatever reason, for new hope, for because they were convicts, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And we're a very multicultural country, lots of people have come, but I think we there is no, there's been no treaty. There's no, has not been a particular voice where we can sit with our brothers and sisters from First Nations people and get their perspective. It seems like it's been a very top down. And of course you can, like I can in my local village here. I give lifts to people and
Hmm.
in my local area because I drive past communities to my place, and I feel like living in Kuranda has been an opportunity to meet a lot of Indigenous people and have conversations. But I know that's not real for everybody, and I certainly, like, I don't go over the house and hang out with them, but I
Mm.
want to learn. I want to learn more, and I think I think that from, I don't know, maybe I live in a bubble, but I feel like people want that. And when you can sit with an Indigenous person, they're happy to share. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're proud of their culture. And I think we've got a great opportunity coming up to be able to listen and let them be heard.
I was at Laura Aboriginal Dance Festival, and one of the commentators just said, "Look, we don't have the Eiffel Tower, we don't have the London Bridge, but you've got us, you know."
Mm.
And they were just so proud. Like, it's really nice to see that they're just so proud of themselves now, and they can. The time. One person even said that the time for shame is over. We were made to feel shameful for what we were and who we are, and yet, like, that was their choice. They didn't need to build these things as a
Mm.
way to conquer the world and conquer nature. They could actually live with it and in the most beautiful way. It's, yeah, absolutely, and there is a lot to learn. Absolutely, a lot to learn.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's cruise through this because we've had such a beautiful conversation. We're 45 minutes in. We've got some more to go, questions to go. So, do you have a particular plant? You mentioned papaya before, but do you have a plant that you can recommend as something that is a valuable ally in a home garden, and why? Like, what have you worked with that's been a helpful ally in your life?
Yeah, like, it does sort of definitely vary in where I've lived before. I've lived all over Australia, and but I just, and this probably doesn't even apply to your listeners really, but I just say, people, just start with tomato.
Hmm.
I was living in this suburban house. I had this 400 millimeter deep um, garden next to a fence, sandwiched between the building, like hardly got any light, and put some tomato seeds in there, and I started with the lettuce and so forth, and the science is there. It says, like, if people have at least something that they're taking from a garden, then they're actually healthier. They are more conscious of what they put in their bodies. So just start small. Like, I really think that, and tomatoes, such as, especially cherry tomatoes, are so easy to grow. But and then things just grow from there. Then you'll be seed swapping, and you'll be doing all sorts of sprouting leeks and all sorts of stuff by the time you know it. But it's people who haven't started, just start, just do something, and you can actually grow something, in a very, very small space, and that'd be my advice. Yeah.
Mm. And have you used plants to, like tomatoes is a very culinary
Mm.
food, and of course, like you said, and Charlie McGee spoke a lot about it in our previous podcast about our microbiome and how when we're eating food that's fresh, that's grown in our garden, or or locally grown by passionate people. All of the soil, the water, the sunlight, everything that has contributed to growing this plant is so much of a higher value than anything that's been
Yeah.
transported, grown in a monoculture, transported to the supermarket. And
Yeah.
that, the varieties that are available of cherry tomatoes alone, like you get like
Yes.
ones of every color, and they're not, like they're heirloom varieties. They have been brought by our ancestors from across the sea. So, how do we? I guess my question is, what's a plant that you've used for your health? Have you got like from a herbalism perspective?
Hmm. Yeah, like I sort of said, I think that I would much rather turn to the natives that are there and find what's there first. No,
Yeah,
that's my sort of style
yeah.
and that's only fairly recently since we've had this eco village. Like that sort of it just challenges you. Um, um, I mean I've eaten vegan for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years or something, and so plants are everything to me. Like that's all I eat. So it's
Mm,
really interesting to see the plants are just so amazing, so diverse. I mean, I've come to North Queensland. I've spent 3 months here. I'm way south now, and there's fruit that I've never even heard of that I've
yeah,
eaten. Like we had Relinia and abiu and durian and custard apple, soursop
yeah.
and black sapote, rambutan, pungium. Have you ever heard of pungium?
Mm,
They reckon there's only one fruiting plant in Australia, and it's near Cape Trib. It's just a beautiful thing. Like mangosteen, noni, these things that I've never even engaged with. And you go to Woolies in that same town, and you've got the same three fruit. Like there's there's a real
mm.
disconnect. I mean,
Oranges,
obviously,
apples, and bananas.
yeah, exactly. Like and when you come up here and you see, I met lots of people who don't eat sugar because of what sugar cane's done to the rainforest here. Where in Maleny it's all about the dairy. Like I've got a overhead photo from 1958. That's 100 years of dairy, and it's just decimated. It's like a moonscape, and that was rainforest. And our choices, the things that we eat, absolutely have a massive impact on what we do. What happen. They just not magically come from the shops, obviously. And the thing, and these beautiful fruits and beautiful things that come from that aren't commercially viable, basically because you can't get them all year round, or they like black sapote is too soft to transport. All these sort of things, pomelos, we have, like these sort of things, like they're just, yeah, we've got to move on. We've got to put pressure on Woolies or whatever. But I mean, you know, like we don't shop at Woolies anyway for lots of reasons down at Maleny. There's got to we've got to access our food. Yeah, like I love what you said before about how, for people that love the land, and even there's even studies, I think, that show even if you're peeing on the land, the plants act differently and give you what you need, and I can't verify that, I don't know, but there's a really interesting sort of field of study now.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
and putting the seed in your mouth and holding it in your mouth before
mm,
you plant it into the ground.
mm, mm.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because all of those incredible tropical fruits that I so love the tropics for. I've moved and lived in Melbourne and other places around Australia, but I always come back to far north Queensland because of
Mm,
the lifestyle and the food. But like those are not native plants. They've been brought here
of
from
course.
Europe, from around other tropical climates.
I did have a Queensland native banana.
Yeah,
Actually, I have
nice.
tried
Yeah,
the
and
land
we
there.
do. We do have these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And like even when from the co-op, you can get rice that's grown, dryland rice that uses very minimal water and is, grown in Australia in, a biodynamic way. That's, there's in Dark Emu explains how there's, a heap of crops that are way more attuned to our Australian climate that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we and research is being done, and these things are being adopted, maybe a little bit too slowly, but we'll see. But I think this, like, the integration. I we design permaculture landscapes, and a lot of the tropical, like these tropical fruits that you talk about, I wonder if you've been and you've seen them and picked them from the trees. Are they in a monoculture? Are they like, is it acres and acres of just mango, or are you experiencing this in a food forest where the land, perhaps it's been that logged or dairy farmed or whatever, and it's been degraded, and then people have come on with a vision and they've grown a food forest with a diverse
Mm.
range of tropical fruits that, do actually come from different tropical belts. Is that your experience of eating tropical fruits, or has it been through
Yeah.
monoculture?
Yeah, no, that's actually one of the reasons I came up here, actually, to experience, I lobbed into a community up here, and, and you have to get across a crocodile river, the Daintree, within a dinghy, and it's all pretty interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely not a monoculture. It's they're just building this whole food forest with all these really really amazing trees, and yeah, like this is, yeah, monoculture is really a problem. I
Yeah.
mean, even like I come from central west New South Wales. I mean, it's dry, and
Mm.
further west, drier even. They've got cotton farms. Like this is
Yeah.
insane. Like cotton's such
Yeah.
a intense
They're growing it out
water
west here
intensive.
now too. Yeah.
It's
So water
ridiculous. Like
intensive.
it's really ridiculous. Whereas hemp and all that. We all know this.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. We've got a, and I come from a, farming family, and it's hard I sort of say to a lot of my cousins and stuff, like, can you do something different, like, and it's really hard, like, to be being a farmer. They just have to put the stuff on the poisons on the food to actually make it grow, and economically just really hard. But I mean, it's just got to keep chipping away and saying, well, there might be another way. I mean, we
Mm.
know, like, subsistence farming, has 1 unit of inputs to like 20 units of food. But
Output. Yeah.
monoculture cropping, broadacre cropping, is actually the opposite. It's 20
Mm.
units of
Of
energy,
input.
and that most of it's fossil fuels, for
Yeah.
one output, one unit of output. And so it's, yeah, we've I mean, this is why I went to a plant-based diet, actually, is just the way that we do farm, particularly, meat and so forth, is just, I couldn't support it. Yeah. And there's no perfect life. There's no perfect ethical life, because I grew up in a farming area. I know that cropping farmers go out and shoot kangaroos and stuff like that to keep off their crops. And this is, it's not. There's no perfect ethical life, but I think we've also got to be happy with what our choices are, and how, do the best we can.
Doing the best we can, and
Mm,
perhaps
mm.
those farmers, people are doing the best they can with what
With
they've
what they know.
got,
Yeah.
and hopefully with new information,
Mm,
and new opportunities for doing things differently, is, people are open to that, because
yeah.
yeah, there are Australian scientists and CSIRO and all of these big organizations that are talking about food cycles, how many food cycles we have left. And
Yes, I did hear that. Someone said that we got 60 harvests left before our soils collapse.
yeah, I heard that
Like,
too. I don't know where that source is from, so I should
I,
look
I
look
don't
for it.
I don't either.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but when
that's
people
that's
talk
pretty
about peak
scary.
oil, it's like the conversation on peak phosphorus,
Mm,
because it's being grown in these ways where NPK is the main inputs that they're putting in
hmm
to
hmm
to grow food for the general public, people who aren't, living in more rural areas that have, more opportunity to grow food, or eat from local passionate market gardeners, or whatever the situation. I think cities are very very dependent on these bigger monoculture food production
And what happens
business.
when there's no food on the shelves at Woolies? Like, what happens? I mean, people say we're 7 meals away from a revolution. Like, hungry people will do almost anything to get fed and feed their families, and it's part of the reason why I started the Eco Village too, is just like to get out of that system. We've only got something like, I think it's about 12, 13 days of food in our system. We've got a just-in-time system. Same with fossil fuels. We're going to go at 30 days of fossil fuels in the system. So, our way of life sits on a knife edge, particularly in the cities. And and I was saying this before COVID came along, and we had a taste,
Yeah.
and what still bamboozles me is that people's first survival instinct was to buy toilet paper, um, and and
What do
we.
you use for toilet paper on
I
site?
don't know. I don't know any good toilet paper recipes. I just don't know how this is how far we've gone away from nature to actually go. This was the important thing, fellas. This was the important. Just
Didn't I see a
yeah,
picture of one of the people in your eco village using a leaf, holding a
yeah.
leaf for toilet paper?
When you should clarify that she was stroking her cheek
Cheek with the leaf, yeah.
on her
Okay,
face on her
take back
face.
that mental image. She was holding
Still
a
getting
leaf in
worse.
her hand, stroking her cheek, proving how
That's
soft
right.
this leaf is.
Got that clear. Yes, that's right. We grow our own toilet paper, and that took me a couple of years to get to sort of like do and get used to, and now it's great, like why would we, why would we get this stuff that's manufactured, usually overseas, and we can use these amazing big leaves and they're soft,
So
yeah.
much,
So
so much embedded energy into the production of
exactly,
these things before it's even transported. What leaf is it?
a wild tobacco leaf, so
Oh,
wild tobacco
tobacco.
tree, yeah. So
Okay,
it's a weed, but it's a good pioneer species, grows really quick, gives you an overstory. So then you can start the other sort of fast growing natives can come up, like bleeding hearts and black wattles and that sort of stuff. So you just need that. You can't build a forest from bare dirt. You gotta have this
yeah.
overstory first. Yeah.
Start with the plants in succession and
Mm,
get that
yeah.
microbial action happening and the
Exactly.
ground covered.
Yeah, especially in these
Amazing.
tropical and subtropical areas, because you can't control weeds, like you can do a little bit, but it's just you need to shade them out and create, create the forests and so forth so that weeds don't happen. To
Yeah,
create the food
because
forest and the syntropic. We got syntropic gardening there as well, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, incredible. All right, well, Andrew, what's alive and thriving in your life right now? Because you've left your eco village, you've been traveling up here. Like, what's
Hmm.
what's happening for you?
Well, it's a lot happening for me personally, I suppose. But, and like I said, I'm always welcome back there. Like I've created a huge amount of social capital down there, so I can always come back, and I might circle back there one day. Who knows? But at the moment, really happy traveling, and I'm just traveling in a really different way. People say, "Oh, go and see this waterfall, that waterfall." Like it's a waterfall. And whereas when I meet people like you and others, there's a richness that you can just plumb. So so much more than a waterfall. And I love waterfalls, of course. But I realize for me, it's actually for me, it's this is my best life traveling, meeting people, getting deep with them, teaching, learning, this sort of stuff. So that's a really beautiful thing. I think for me also, like I've really started thinking about what I put in my mouth, but what some, I guess I see in the movement, the herbalism movement and so forth, that there are people that would go down to the health food shop and spend $70 on these exotic things, and yet actually not really deal with the trauma, the pain of their emotional life. And I sometimes wonder, if we haven't actually really, put a band-aid on a gangrenous leg. Is it gangrenous leg? And of course, what happened? I'm not trying to say either or, but sometimes I see this. I see this, and I've done it in myself. Is that you want this quick fix, and if it's got something with a plant or even plant medicine, if someone's had 100 goes at plant medicine, is that really journeying, or is it really something else? Is it really? Are we really dealing with the deep emotional traumatic, trauma? I mean, there's so many. I've done counselling as a profession, and there is so many people traumatized obviously by sexual abuse and patriarchy and capitalism even, like, and these stresses and pressures overwhelm us, and without the deep emotional work, I think what we put in our mouth is less important. I mean, it's all important, but you hear what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Even
Yeah.
our obsessions with pets, like yeah, pets are good for our mental health, but Australians spend more money on pets than we do our own healthcare. And of course they're good for their mental health, but surely humans are built for primary connection to be with other humans. And that's what I was trying to do at the Eco Village as well. Is that we don't have dogs and cats there, and I love dogs and cats, but we're trying to build this connection, deep connection with other humans, because
Yeah.
that's sort of who we are. That's what we're built for, and I don't. Yeah, I guess what's life for me is that sort of that shortcut. I don't know, spiritual bypassing, all those sort of bypassing sort of methods to just because it's really hard to go through that emotional trauma and the difficult stuff that's happened to us, and yet in my experience we just have to. It's when I was doing grief trauma, I said it's um, the old nursery rhyme, come going on a bear hunt, come to a forest, can't go over it, can't go around it, got to go through it. I mean, that for
True.
me is grief counselling. We've got to do the hard yards and go through it, and I hope with at any that as we evolve and we learn more about plants and more about earth and soil health and microbiome and mycorrhizal networks and fungi, and we also learn about ourselves and our traumas, and to be able to connect with people in a healthy way is just the best life possible. That's where
Yeah.
I'm at, I think.
Yeah. I hear you, and I'm hearing from your experience of pioneering, I suppose, or if the word is seeding eco village, and then collaborating with people to have a successful eco village, and so you've witnessed people eating healthy and eating from the land, and see that, and using plants for medicine, but what you've gained from that experience in the social realm of being in close communal living with people is that all of these things are one aspect, but if the fundamental emotional and trauma aspects of each person, if that's not supported. So you're saying like the social and the relationship realm is something that, like, relationships is a way to help people through their trauma, through your
Yeah, I
counseling
mean, well, in a
experience.
relationship we hurt, in a relationship we heal, and but like we know from again, science is out there saying that that human connection is
Mm,
actually the biggest factor in long life and happy and healthy life. Like if you're a heavy smoker and a drinker, I mean that's traditionally seen as a really bad thing for your health. That's actually not as bad as health factor as if you are alone, if you socially
mm,
isolate. And
mm,
so this connection. I mean, we started the project by saying it's got to be connection with self, connection with others, connection with the earth, connection with the divine. If that's your thing, like I was so excited to be at the Eco Village to learn more building techniques and learn more gardening and learn syntropics and more permaculture. And I was so excited, and to my shame, I missed this a bit, at the start. That actually working together is the work. The
yeah,
other stuff's peripheral. It's
yeah,
actually if in yeah, if we don't if we don't learn how to work together, we might be in real trouble. So work,
yeah,
getting on together, but for me, it's a very holistic thing. It's like getting on with self. I mean, so many people, and it's really obvious when people come to our eco village and live with us when they hate themselves. Like this is
mm,
it's really obvious and it's sad. And some of the
mm,
saddest things I've seen some really sad things. I've presided over funerals of babies and children, and I've seen some really sad things in my life. But I actually want to think one of the saddest things I've ever seen is a 90-year-old on their deathbed talking about their sexual abuse, and when they were 12 or something. They could have had 20 or 70 or 20 good years, but they stuck, and I see. I mean, I look. My mother was a health food nut. We had a daily dose of cod liver oil, and I hated it. I was always different at school because I always having all these things, to eat, and medicines, and and yet we weren't really taught about this deep psychological and interpersonal work. This
Emotional intelligence
emotional, exactly,
or
and
non-violent communication.
yeah, well, I love NBC, and it's really beautiful to be able to actually live it in a really special way, that with other people who want to live it as well.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best thing about being in a community for me, was just my being able to live my values. Like I seem to, everywhere I go, whether it's in a box in the suburbs, in the in a city or somewhere, wherever it's really hard to live your values. And this is the closest I've ever got, which was great. So if any of you listeners want to create a small community, and maybe Australia's first herbalism community, then come and talk to me. That's what we do. That's our jam. We have a model, a financial model, an economic model that you can use to start your own communities, and you can do that really quickly too, with our hack, with the EVA hack, the Eco Villages Australia hack. But that's you can go on the website for that, and www.ecovillages.au. So I'm committed to doing that. I don't get paid for that. I just love what I do, and building community is my jam, and that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life to do, committed to doing. And I get to meet wonderful people like you, Neil.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure. I had a few different people say, "Oh, this guy's in town. You have to meet him." So it all aligned really well, and yeah, we kind of met over the Eco Villages card set for designing regenerative
Yeah,
communities.
I was really, really happy to see you.
I think it piqued some interest for a few people there. And what I loved about learning, listening into your forum, was that you have this model that you just mentioned. However, it seemed quite flexible. So even though you're sharing, your successes and your failures, and why you set up the model the way you did, and how it's really, there's a lot of permaculture principles embedded in it, especially that economic permaculture, and creating a new system in ways, because it's like against not against, but it's different to how normal housing and other eco villages have worked. And you said 90% of eco villages fall over, like 90% of businesses do. So I found a lot of value in, and I'm still processing, the things that you said. So I'll definitely sit down and have a look through your website. But I think it's amazing that you are so open to sharing and giving your time to help people. And, there's that principle of slow and small solutions. And I see that, you're not going huge. It's like 5 to 15 people, and working with the land, and what's actually how it can be a reciprocal relations-based experience, and the onus or the focus on building all of those different forms of capital, social being, a big part of it, but experiential, like all of the learnings of how to live in an eco village, and the cultural forming that happens through that. And I think it's a really good demonstration, and it's been a pleasure meeting you. I have enjoyed this talk. We've gone over an hour now, so it's really rich. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you wanted to share with our listeners before we say goodbye today?
Look, I think it's on the front page of our website. Actually, it's a little thing I just coined. It's not brilliant, but for me, it's like design always wins. So whatever we design into our life, how we design our living spaces. The reason that most houses don't work as a share housing is because it's not designed for that. It's designed for mum, dad, 2 kids, and a dog. and the way we design our gardens, permaculture principles, and so the way we design our governments and our structures and our institutions, it always wins, and so we need the best design we can, and
Conscious
so
design.
yeah, absolutely, and human-centered design, like our towns and cities are built for cars. That's not human-centered. Like we live in our design is co-housing, so cars go to the edges. You leave the cars on the edges of those buildings, and everything in the middle is all human scale. It's all walking and maybe bike riding, but that's it. And it's just a very different feel. It's a beautiful feel.
Or nature-centric design. So
Exactly.
it's
Yes.
us, it's the plants, it's the animals, and it's
Yes.
the energetic flows of all of the natural resources, and
Yeah.
how we are one part of that. And well, so much food for thought for all of us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Danielle.
The Elder Tree is a not-for-profit organisation that is in the beginning stages of creating a grassroots herbal education centre and healing sanctuary in the Atherton Tablelands of Far North Queensland. To find out more, go to theeldertree.org and follow the journey on Instagram and Facebook. You can also donate to the Elder Tree via our podcast channel on Anchor or via the website. If you like the episode, we'd love you to subscribe. And if you know who we should interview next, drop us a line. See you next month, and in the meantime, may you grow them to know them and be blessed with good health and many plants.